Hey guys, Paul here once again with VHScollector.com, here to bring you another VHS review, and today we are talking about a movie called Caged Terror. This was made in 1986, or it was released in 1986 by New World Video. The movie itself was made in 1972 under the original title Golden Apples of the Sun. So let's look at the cover here. On the top it reads, "Experience the cold and inhumane isolation of Caged Terror." And you see a woman there with some crazy hair. She's behind bars and barbed wire. Sounds like, or looks like, a woman is held captive as a sex slave or something. That's usually where the imagination goes with these sort of covers. I find it interesting that this has a new release sticker on it. Now, although this video cassette was released in 1986, the movie was made in 1972, as I said, so if you got this from the new release shelf and you watched it and you saw some old, grimy, horrible movie from the 70s, you would be quite disappointed. So I always find that sort of misleading to release a movie on the new release shelf when it's, over a decade old. But anyway, let's look at the back. Behind these bars lies an unbridled fury, Caged Terror, a tale of madness, infidelity, and revenge. Everyone needs to get away from it all, and the country is the most tranquil place to escape life's everyday battles. Or is it? Richard and Janet, a city couple, find that just the opposite is true as their weekend getaways transformed into a frightening and primitive wilderness. Camping for the night in a seemingly abandoned farmhouse, the two are suddenly joined by strangers who have been secretly watching them all afternoon. Strangers who will soon cage Richard like a trapped animal and ravage his wife. Strangers who will drive Richard berserk in the cold and inhumane isolation of Caged Terror. Now, reading the back, it's pretty accurate, although extremely embellished. It's kind of funny. This person, whoever wrote this at New World Video, should really get an Employee of the Year award just for how cleverly it embellishes what this movie actually is, which we'll of course delve into in a little bit. But I did notice a discrepancy. I don't know if you noticed it. At some point on the back it says, "Strangers who will soon cage Richard like a trapped animal." So yes, Richard is the only one caged in this movie, although the front shows a woman caged. So obviously the cover was designed paying no mind to what was written on the back. So, but yeah, like I said, we'll delve right into it. What else is on this cover? It says on the spine, action thriller. Now, what's funny is that this is neither an action or thriller movie. It's actually just a really, really boring drama, sort of. I mean, maybe there's one thrilling moment in the movie. So let's dig into this movie, let's break down the plot and see exactly what it's all about. The film opens with a pre-credit montage. We see traffic, smokestacks, and the hustle and bustle on the sidewalks of a major city. At the same time, a news bulletin on a car radio reports that city folks not only suffer from air pollution, but also spirit pollution due to overpopulation. We then cut to our lead, Richard, a Steve Martin look-alike, planning a date with Janet at the office. When the credits finally roll, we're in the wilderness. Although there are many names credited, most are likely fake. After viewing the film, I find it hard to believe that it had a crew larger than maybe 3 or 4 people. You'll see what I mean. During the credits, we meet 2 men who would later confront our couple. The white guy, named Troubadour, plays the guitar, while Jarvis, the black guy, picks cotton and plays with a rabbit. Once the music ends, we finally see Richard and Janet. We get an interesting conversation about their favorite seasons and whether they like their jobs. Once they reach the footbridge at the end of a path, they just stand there looking around. Over a minute goes by without any dialogue or music. This becomes a recurring theme throughout the movie. At one point, Richard pulls a fishing line from his pocket and begins to fish. All this time, no one speaks to each other. After some more aimless wandering around in the woods, they finally stop for a chat. They have a deep conversation about whether fish have feelings. When Robert finally convinces her to eat the fish, he shoots a rabbit, prompting her to say with a straight face,
"Are you gonna kill me like you did the rabbit and the fish?"
An interesting question to ask on a first date for sure. This prompts another deep discussion, this time over guns. Every time Robert makes a good point, which is rare considering how dumb both of these characters are, she simply responds with,
"Oh, you don't understand."
He then presents her with the following scenario.
Suppose somebody came along out here, got rough, killed me, and took you away. What would you do about that?
To which she replies with,
"What I have can't be taken. It can only be given."
Ha!
Like with a previous film we reviewed, Dreams, also known as Sunburst, made in 1975, this one attempts to point out how removed from reality hippie idealism is. Obviously, these two are polar opposites. Despite this, they do one of the most predictable things in a camping movie. You guessed it, they're skinny dipping. Well, sort of. Richard decides to go in with his tighty-whities, which, to me, would have been more embarrassing than just going completely nude. Once they jump out of the water, they have one of the most awkward and bizarre sex scenes I've seen in a long time. Janet lays there like a log while Robert fondles her. The camera guy has fun with some unusual close-ups. If that wasn't weird enough, Robert disappears for a brief moment to return with a handful of blood from the rabbit he shot earlier and smears it all over Janet's body and face. Despite this being the couple's first date, she doesn't seem to mind. Now, if you learned anything from our previous reviews, these scenes wouldn't be complete without a voyeur watching everything go down. This one seems to teleport. They eventually come across a cabin, which Janet explores for what feels like maybe 10 minutes. We are then blessed with another memorable line of dialogue from Janet.
I wish you wouldn't say what when you don't hear what I say.
Huh? What is she expecting him to say? I beg your pardon? Anyway, when they head back outside, they discover the cage. When they both enter, I was thinking, finally, this film can finally get started. I figured the two guys from earlier in the film were going to jump out from the bushes and lock them inside. But much to my dismay, this did not happen. Instead, we get another long, drawn-out scene of the couple preparing lunch. When Janet cuts open a pomegranate, she has a realization that her life was not as beautiful as the fruit. She rambles on about how she remained there with Robert despite their ideological differences. This caused her to cry, to which he responds by saying,
Gotta go take a crap.
While Richard takes his dump, the two guys from earlier in the film appear. When Troubadour begins singing and playing guitar, we get a montage of seemingly random clips I can't make much sense of. They include Janet playfully wrestling with Jarvis in the grass, and Richard lying in a pile of snow. When the song ends, the two men depart peacefully. After meeting the two strangers, Janet now feels comfortable spending the night at the cabin, because, as she states,
I'm not so frightened now having met those guys. Anyone who can sing a song like that isn't going to hurt us.
Ha!
That night, while the couple is asleep, Richard is awoken by the two men joking and laughing in a nearby field. Annoyed, Richard fires at them, an incredibly dumb move. The two men then enter the cabin. Jarvis locks Janet in the icebox, while Robert is forced to give up his gun. With 15 minutes left in the film, we finally have someone caged against their will. Robert is bound inside, forced to watch Jarvis grope and kiss Janet's unconscious body. More weirdness. We are then gifted with a single shot of Robert saying please 18 times.
Please. Please. Please don't. Please. 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 Please, please. Please, 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 please. What have you done to her? What have you done? Please, please.
You have to really wonder what the editor was thinking putting this masterpiece together. The next morning, Robert wakes in the cage to see Janet and the two men in a distant field saying goodbye to each other. Is she even aware of what happened the night before? The final shot has Janet approaching Robert in the cage. The end. The film's director, Barrie McLean, has had a long career producing short films for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation and the National Film Board of Canada. Much of his IMDb credits are for his work on these short films. This film, Golden Apples of the Sun, was directed early in his career and appears to have been his first and last feature-length film he directed. Digging around, I found McLean's resume, where Golden Apples of the Sun was conveniently left out. Smart. As for the cast of this film, the two leads who played Robert and Janet never made it beyond this film. No surprise there. However, much like the director, Derek Lamb, who played Troubadour, had a long history producing films for the CBC and NFB. Leon Morenzi, his partner in crime, has had a career as a voice actor and coach. The biggest successes to come from this film are composer Galt McDermott, who wrote scores for such Hollywood films as Forrest Gump and The 40-Year-Old Virgin. The grip on this film also made his way to Hollywood, becoming a successful DP for television. So you might have noticed how similar this movie is to another film we looked at recently called Slash Dreams. That one was made in 1975 with the original title of Sunburst. And as we discussed in that review, it wasn't really a horror movie. It was really just a movie about, I guess, the end of hippie idealism in the 70s, right? And that's pretty much what this movie is. It's the same basic principle, or theme I should say, although this movie goes off the deep end with some of its weirdo dialogue. Certainly this is more interesting than that movie, although definitely not as well made. Although I'm not saying that one was well made, this one is just a train wreck in comparison. But anyway, these two movies have a lot in common. They were made in the same time period. This one 1972, Sunburst was made in 1975. They both have this poetry element to it. Now the original title to this one, as I said, was Golden Apples of the Sun. That is the last line of a very popular poem. Sunburst, that movie ends with our lead actress in that movie reciting a poem from her friend's book, her friend's poetry book. So, you know, the same mindset created both of these movies, which I find very interesting. Of course, they both involve a couple going into the woods, a couple skinny dipping, a couple being confronted by two bad guys. Although in this movie, the guys really aren't bad. Actually, they're kind of nice guys who don't cause any trouble to anybody until Richard starts shooting at them. But anyway, it's still a similar premise in both movies. So you really have to ask yourself, why were there so many movies like this made? You got Caged Terror, you got Sunburst, you have, I think, another movie, Bloodstalkers, is out there. I haven't seen it in many years, so maybe I might be wrong. So you really got to ask yourself that. Also, there's another one you might have heard of called The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, made in 1974. That movie was obviously made to be a horror movie, according to Tobe Hooper, a comedy horror movie, and it has that awesome title, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it has a chainsaw in it. Just an, you know, without even seeing the movie, you're terrified at the idea of it. So it doesn't compare, obviously, or these don't compare to that movie by any means, but all three movies, or four movies, were all made with that same mindset in that same time period, which I find very interesting. But also in the 70s, a lot of movies were made in the woods, it seems, right? By the 70s, cameras were starting to become more accessible. Now, where would the easiest place be to make a movie? Of course, the woods. Don't have to worry about a permit. You don't have to worry about the public walking into your shot. You could pretty much go out into the woods and shoot whatever the hell you want and no one will bother you. You could scream, you could splash blood all over the place, you could do whatever you want, no one's going to really care, at least back then in the 70s. The woods were sort of like a sandbox, so a lot of students, film students, or new directors went out into the woods and started shooting stuff just because it was easy and cheap to do that. So would I recommend this movie to casual horror fans? Definitely not. This movie's really boring. There's a lot of boring scenes, although it has some great dialogue and some really funny, unintentionally funny moments. You have to wonder, did someone actually sit down and write this at a typewriter? I highly doubt it. I can't imagine someone thinking these lines out and typing them on paper just because they're so bad. How did a lot of the lines in this movie make sense in someone's head when they were writing it? This is not a hidden gem by any means. So if you're looking for one of those diamonds in the rough, an obscure movie that most people don't know about but is actually pretty decent, definitely not Caged Terror. Now, I'm surprised that this movie was even picked up by New World Video, right? A reputable company who released films like Hellraiser. What were they doing with a movie like Caged Terror or Golden Apples of the Sun? They must have been in some screening room, watched this movie and said, you know what, yeah, maybe we can do something with it. And they turned it into this exploitation horror survival movie when clearly it was not. What kind of nerve do you really have to do something like that? So I expect that from a lot of smaller labels, but New World Videos, you know, it's up there. They actually, I think, produced some major movies. What were they doing with this train wreck? It might have been part of a package deal. I think in several scenes throughout the movie, a minute will go by with them just standing around. This couple doesn't have any chemistry, so they'll just be standing around with no music or dialogue. If you are interested in really bad movies, definitely check this out. This is up there. This could qualify for the top 10 worst movies on IMDb for sure. Maybe not a lot of people know about it, but it's pretty bad. Yeah, that's Caged Terror, also known as Golden Apples of the Sun. Obviously, from the original title, not a horror movie, like I said. I just find it funny. Caged Terror and Golden Apples from the Sun. But anyway, this has been Paul with VHScollector.com. I will see you guys next time. Thanks.
Don't touch her! Don't touch her! Leave her alone! I don't... No!